Good afternoon. It's the 26th day of February 2021. How fast time flies. And this podcast, this segment is going to be a little bit different than my other podcasts. What I did a couple days ago, and this is a very important thing that as you get older to keep in touch with people. I was going to call one of my DEA brothers, co-worker, retired DEA agent, and I was going to interview him for the purpose of this, and found out that he had passed in December of COVID-19 at age 75. His name was Milt Shoquist. Had been an Austin police officer from 1966 to 1977, a DEA special agent from 1977 to 2000, and he retired in that year, and I knew him as I worked in DEA headquarters. And what I was going to speak about, what I am going to speak about actually, this podcast is in his memory, but what I was going to speak about to him about is what we hear so much nowadays, particularly with this defund the police. The police don't need this, the police don't need that. They bought an up-armored Humvee. Why do they need all of this military equipment? It's the whole issue of the militarization of police. And of course, there was a time in the United States when the police were not militarized, when they had civilian or just law enforcement rather than military equipment. This would go back to the 1960s. Certainly in the 1960s, your average police officer carried a 6-shot revolver, did not have a bulletproof vest because that technology had not yet been invented. And the other weapon that would supplement would be the 12-gauge shotgun. And this is generally was considered and was, absolutely all that was essential when dealing with your average type of event that the police would confront. And what did they confront? Well, you would have crime, your usual type of crime, your street crime, your muggings, your robbery, and then just the regular police duties. But on one hot day in August of 1966, August 1st, 1966, in Austin, Texas, an event would take place that would be the first of many such events. And it would require and eventually result in a transformation in law enforcement. And that event took place when a deranged man had murdered his mother and his wife, and then with several weapons took an elevator to the top of the Texas Tower at the University of Texas in Austin, and then after killing the receptionist, opened fire from a sniper's nest on students who were getting out of class below. And by the time the incident was finished, he had killed 16 people, wounded somewhere in the vicinity of 50. He had only a deer rifle and an M1 rifle and some handguns, but he was a very well-trained marksman. He was able to hit people up to 500 yards. And what happened is the police obviously were called, but how do you deal with a situation like that? Again, it's 1966. You have no special training. You have no special equipment. You have your revolver, and there's a guy way up on top of a tower in a covered position, opening fire on anyone who tries to cover open ground to even rescue those who've been shot. As they would run forward to rescue them, the gunman would fire on them, in some cases hitting them. In some cases, the people were able to drag the wounded or, unfortunately, the dead back off the hot pavement, because it was well over 100 degrees that day, to an area of safety. So we're going to watch first a video just on the events of that day from the news taken on that day. And again, it was the most remarkable crime in U.S. history up to that point. The first time we had a mass shooting. And so we're going to watch that.
Good evening. One of history's worst mass murders occurred here in Austin today. By official count tonight, 49 persons were hit by gunfire. There are 16 dead and 33 injured. It started last night when a man reportedly killed his wife and his mother. That same man apparently rounded up an arsenal and supplies this morning and then went to the observation deck of the University of Texas Tower. It was then that terror rained down from the tower. Charles Ward was there and described the shooting. Time the first call came in to the UT police at 11:48 a.m. until Austin police gunned down the man they said was the sniper at 1:22 p.m. The university campus resembled a battlefield. Dead people were lying on the hot sidewalks, and dozens of courageous persons risked death time and time again to try to save them. One funeral director driving an ambulance was shot and critically injured trying to help. An Austin policeman lost his life. A University of Texas professor was killed. Countless students and innocent bystanders fell without knowing what hit them. A boy riding a bicycle was picked off with deadly accuracy. Time and time again, men risked their lives to try to save others, and this man shown here hauling a dead man to safety was one such man. Charles Ward talked with him after he got back.
One of those who is out of breath now after running out onto the mall rescuing those who have been shot is Brian Ellison of Austin, who's been in Vietnam, has been back for 2 years. Brian, how many have you gone out to rescue?
Today, 2.
What did you have to do?
Run hard and keep low.
Did you have any trouble getting them up, or did any shots come close to you while you were out there?
No shots came close to me. It's just the last one. He was dead. He was dead weight. He was a little hard to pick up, too limp. Not like someone who's knocked out.
How many have you seen that are dead today?
Just one. I hope not anymore.
But there were more, many more, and the full impact of today's tragedy still has not been felt because the magnitude of the crime is practically impossible to comprehend. Charles J. Whitman, a 25-year-old Marine veteran who earned a sharpshooter rating while on active duty. He was identified by police as the sniper. He was shot down on the observation deck by 2 city policemen.
As I said, one of the officers involved that day was Milt Shoquist. He was a police officer newly hired on the Austin Police Department, 21 years old, and he was off duty, but he heard what was going on at the tower, and then he responded and drove to the tower and drove to an area on the university campus, I should say. And he met up with several other officers in the security office, Officer Jerry Day, Officer Ramirez, a civilian named Alan Crump, and Houston McCoy, and they put together a plan. And Milt used to say I was on the first SWAT team ever, and that was kind of a joke because it wasn't a SWAT team. It was an ad hoc SWAT team, something that they threw together to make it work. And what they decided to do, and God bless them for it, they entered a maintenance office and through a underground tunnel were able to access the tower. Now, getting to the tower, the ground floor, they have no idea how many snipers there are, how many people are in the tower on the different levels. So they have to begin clearing the floors. And as they got to the top, they came across the first bodies. And they were then able to force their way into the observation deck office. And Milt took the body of the receptionist, Miss Edna Townsley, down to the ground floor, and Officer McCoy and Officer Ramirez and a civilian named Alan Crump then made entrance to the observation deck, and Officer Ramirez then shot and killed the gunman, who was subsequently identified as Charles Whitman. So we're going to hear a little bit from retired Agent Shoquist, who made this video in 2016.
I think, looking back to that day in August of '66, I think it's hard for people nowadays to put themselves in that place. It's even hard for me to go back to that time because 50 years have transpired and so many things have changed over the years. But we were really just a naive, small community. Maybe Austin was 250,000 back then. University maybe 30, 40,000 student population. And for me, I was saying I was 21 years old when it happened. I was just a rookie police officer and can relate with that age group of the student population. So it was a different time and place. Nothing like that had ever happened before. For me, it was hard to believe it was happening as I was off duty and went down there with Officer Harold Moe from our residences. And I remember driving down 35 and looking up at the tower and not being able to comprehend what was going on up there. It was really not being able to believe it. And then you think, well, it's all going to be over. By the time I get there, you keep thinking it's going to be over, but it wasn't until we actually got together at the 7 officers, or 6 of us got together over at the security office and made our way to the tower, and then you know, the rest has been documented many times. But yeah, one of the things I remember the most after it was over was, of course, we were bringing bodies down at that point. Some we thought might be alive. Well, some of them were alive, but most of them were dead by that point. And when we came down, the elevators were so small you couldn't get a stretcher on them. You had to either, in fact, one of the ladies we brought down in an army blanket. But when we walked out onto the campus there to go to the ambulances, there were thousands or hundreds or maybe thousands of students, but not a sound. It was totally quiet. And when we walked out, they just kind of parted and then closed in behind us. And it was surreal to have that many people and that quiet and nobody asking them to be quiet. That's one of the strangest memories I have of it. One of the things for me was being a rookie officer with little or no experience. I just really have a lot of love and respect for the men I went up there with.
So hopefully what this video shows and what this flashback shows and events like this show is that you can never be too prepared, I think. You have to have armored vehicles. During the shooting itself, they had to commandeer an armored vehicle, an armored car, from a money deposit company so they could go out and try to rescue people who were bleeding out on the pavement. Because you couldn't go out in a regular ambulance or a regular vehicle. He's going to shoot that up. Okay. A helicopter, a news helicopter went overhead. He opened fire on the helicopter. Okay, so this pointed to the need of specially trained officers with special equipment, with military type equipment. And then there would be other events that took place as well that also underscored the need for this type of thing. Certainly the 1972 Munich crisis in Munich, where the Israeli athletes were taken hostage by Palestinian terrorists, and the Munich police department was utterly unprepared to deal with anything like that, and most of the athletes were killed. They had nothing more than revolvers and a 12-gauge ion. No specially trained unit at all of police to deal with this kind of situation. Certainly the 1974 shootout between the Symbionese Liberation Army and the LAPD, another poignant reminder of why we had to develop such a thing. And then the 1986 FBI shootout in Miami. So this is why police do need special equipment. They do need up-armored Humvees. A lot of the people who will tell you that you don't need that, you don't need this is the militarization of the police. What you need is social workers. Well, a lot of times you may not need more than that, but when the time comes, and it will come. And as we heard on the video, they had no idea, and no one had any conception that anything like this was ever going to take place, but it did take place. So God bless the officers involved. Officer Ramirez, who killed Whitman, Officer McCoy, the civilian Alan Crump, Milt Shoquist spent 11 years on the Austin Police Department, 23 years as a DEA special agent, and risked his life undercover many times. Did a lot of great things, but unfortunately died as a result of the horrible COVID virus. So this video is dedicated to his memory. And to the memory of all the people, Officer Billy Speed, who was killed that day, and all the innocent people who were shot and killed for no purpose, just by this crazy lunatic who had nothing. He didn't have an assault rifle. All he had was a deer rifle, but he knew how to use it. He was well trained. A special thanks should also be given to the citizens of Austin who not only risked their lives to save those who had been shot down, but in a little known fact, many of the citizens, of course, of Austin were armed and retrieved deer rifles from their vehicles and engaged in a firefight with the sniper. And the value of this, a lot of times it's overlooked. Most of the damage that was done very early on. After that, he was pinned down. And that also shows, the value sometimes of, at least in this case, for sure, of an armed citizenry, of people who are able to respond because they were the only people who were initially able to respond.
Interestingly, I saw several citizens of Austin dressed in normal shirt sleeves and khaki pants carrying high-powered weapons running toward me and running toward the campus. Well, what happened, they were citizens who heard the broadcast and heard me say, "Stay away," but their instinctive reaction was to the contrary. They grabbed their own deer rifles that they had, rushed to the campus, and started firing at the sniper, almost like a vigilante effort. In retrospect, a lot of folks were critical of these average citizens coming out with a weapon and engaging in a firefight with a madman. But I look at it totally differently. These guys who fired at the top of the tower, when they turned their weapons toward the tower, they pinned Charles Whitman down. And after his initial surge, where he did most of his damage, up until the time he was actually killed, the latter part of that time frame, maybe as much as 30, 45 minutes, he did very little damage. One, because people were hiding and people were staying out of the way, but two, because he was pinned down by these citizens who were shooting back at him, along with a few of the police officers who got their own weapons that they had at home.
One of the first police officers to arrive on campus was 22-year-old Billy Speed. Officer Speed, seen here crouching down and below a statue of Jefferson Davis, must have assumed he was covered by the thick limestone railings. Officer Speed assumed he was safe. But Whitman, warming to his game, proved him wrong. Whitman's first shot missed, but a second round hit Officer Speed in the shoulder and tore into his chest. Students frantically tried to help the officer. He was loaded into one of the first ambulances to arrive, taken to Brackenridge Hospital, but was dead on arrival.
So this is a tribute then to the courage of Special Agent and Austin Police Officer Milt Choquist and all of the other officers who were involved that day, all the civilians who risked their lives to save others, and to those who lost their lives senselessly on that day. So may God bless them, and may God bless the United States, and hopefully this was somewhat informative for you. Okay, thank you.